sexually arouses someone by what kind of pornography they watch. And if you look at his searches for porn, and he searched specifically related to torture. Girl tortured and raped, girl raped after torture, girl screams in pain, torture, girl tortured and raped, XXX, anime torture, cute girl tortured, raped until death, raping and killing. He also had visited websites related to rape and torture. These included ripherup.com, screamincream.com, cruelnetwork.com, hogtied.com, and bestgore.com.
In one of your books, you describe a sadistic high that some sadists experience. What is that?
Well, I have interviewed offenders who've talked about this, and that is that they get a high from torture and the suffering of others that some of them say lasts, is far better than orgasm. It will last for a significant period of time. Some have said it's better than crack, better than cocaine. They get, as I said, a kind of reverse empathy. Instead of feeling badly for the person, they get an adrenaline rush and a personal high from it.
Do they frequently refer to it in exactly those terms, as an adrenaline rush?
Yes, sir.
In your experience, do some of these offenders, do they describe needing more and more violence to reach that same high?
Yes, sir. That's a well-known characteristic of sadistic offenders, is that they habituate to a certain level of pornography or behavior, and it no longer works for them, so then they seek out more and more violent pornography to maintain that high that they get.
And what about their behaviors?
Eventually, for some of them, pornography is not enough, and their behaviors, they start acting out the behaviors in real life.
In your report, you note that Austin Sigg said that he felt an adrenaline rush after the Kettner attacked, and that he described it as overwhelming him, and that it overcame his fear. Did that mean anything to you?
But that is very much in keeping with what I've heard from other sadistic offenders.
He talked about it being a physical response, the adrenaline rush that he felt. Again, is that characteristic of the sadists that you've interviewed?
That is characteristic of this type of offender.
He also says that he thinks that the adrenaline rush may have driven, in essence, all of his hunting for victims. Is that characteristic of this type of offender?
Well, yes, people do what is pleasurable for them. They don't do things that make them feel bad. So what he describes is very familiar to me, which is, once having tasted this adrenaline rush, he wants to have it happen over and over again. And just the fact of anticipation, of fantasy, of hunting, and he said, I believe that it was a perfect word for it, all of that will induce this kind of high.
I believe you said that Mr. Sigg agreed that the perfect word to describe what he was doing was hunting?
I believe so, yes.
Can you always accurately determine an offender's thoughts from their statements?
No.
An interview with the police, an interview with others, is that always an accurate insight into what they're thinking? No.
Sex offenders and killers, in my opinion, will often reveal the tip of the iceberg. They'll reveal either what they got caught for, what they can't deny, or what they think is not so bad. What they keep hidden are the things that they think are worse. and that they don't want anyone to know about.
In your report, well, one of the things that Mr. Sigg says to the police is that he told his mother what he did and confessed to the police out of remorse, or to give closure to the Ridgway family. In light of your experience, is that a credible claim?
Objection, Your Honor. No objection.
I'll sustain that request for her to opine as to that.
Did
She
you
testified to her general, the way people minimize or whatever, but as to what he was thinking at that time, I sustain the objection.
Is it important to understand an offender's motivations, including the motivation to talk to the police?
Yes.
Did you look at Mr. Sigg's motivation in talking to the police?
Yes, sir.
Did you examine his claim that he felt remorse?
Yes, sir.
And why is it important to understand that, whether he felt remorse? Or is it important to understand whether he felt remorse?
No objection, Your Honor.
You know, I think we're talking...
I'll allow the answer. I may strike it, but I'll allow the answer.
It's important to determine whether someone really has remorse because it tells you something about their psychological makeup and their degree of callousness, for example. These are important factors in understanding the crime and the dynamics of the psychological makeup of the person who committed it.
You know, with that in mind, I'd like to re-ask the question.
I understand. I'm the finder of fact here, so I'll make the determination without further process.
All right. Are there factors that you looked at without reaching a conclusion? Are there things that you looked at that were relevant to the issue of whether he had remorse?
Yes, sir. If you want to know if an offender has remorse, you should look at what they do before they are caught. But the time period between the offense and when they are caught for the offense. After they are caught for the offense, virtually every offender says they are really sorry and they have guilt and they have remorse and so forth. But I have seen offenders that are truly remorseful, and you see it immediately after the crime. You see it before they are caught.
Did you evaluate or look at Austin Sigg's behavior as documented by friends and family between the date of Jessica Ridgway's murder, October 5th, and the date that he talked to the police, October 23rd?
Yes, sir.
What did you note of significance?
He did not appear to be...
Objection, Your Honor. Same objection as earlier on as well.
I'll allow, again, I'm the one, if it's important to me, I won't be the one who makes that decision. I'll allow her answer as to what she saw in the conduct during the period of time. You may answer.
Do you remember the question?
Yeah, yes, sir. What the people close to him said is that they had no idea that he was involved, based partially on his reaction to the crime. When it was discussed, he was not anxious. He did not appear upset. No one reported that he had any kind of panic attack. He functioned perfectly normally in the period of time until he gave the DNA and then learned that the police had DNA on the victim and also on the jogger attack.
So, in your record review, he gave his DNA sample on October 19th, then had a panic attack. Then October 22nd, the media released that there was a DNA connection between the Kettner attack and Jessica Ridgway's murder.
Yes, sir.
And it was following that news release the next day, the 23rd, that he had a panic attack.
It was following that he had a panic attack and became very anxious and told his mother. But none of those things happened before he knew that he would be caught.
You said that sex offenders usually reveal only the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, sir.
In your experience, well, why would someone admit to kidnapping and murdering a child but not admit to the sexual assault?
Well, first of all, they typically don't admit to kidnapping and murder unless they've been caught for it and really have no wiggle room in that regard. What they will not admit to is something that you typically can't prove, or even if you can prove it, that they consider somehow worse. I have learned that that offenders often have ideas that seem strange to us about what is worse, one thing being more shameful than another. So they won't reveal things that they think are particularly shameful and that you can't prove.
Do you attach any psychological significance to what he told his mother, that without being asked, when he says that he killed Jessica Ridgway, without being asked, he says, "But I didn't rape her, I didn't torture her"?
Yes, his mother didn't ask him those questions. And if it is known, for example, Gavin de Becker talks about this in his book, The Gift of Fear. What he says is, if someone promises you they didn't do something or they're not going to do something that you didn't ask them to, you can count on the fact that they did it. Now, that's his opinion. I would say that, in my opinion, what that suggests is that he thought that would bother his mother particularly, and so those were the things that he did not admit. He would not admit to her.
Those are the things that he was most protective of?
He was most protective of. They were also on his mind because that came voluntarily out of him.
Judge, again, I'm going to object and move to strike. Speculation. There's no clinical interview. There's no foundation for this opinion that's been articulated.
Overrule all presumed testimony.
He also made a statement that you note in your report. He was asked if he had done other things to her body, sexual things. Would that make it worse? Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And he agreed that yes, if he had done other things to her, that would make it worse.
Yes. The question was, if other things happened with her body, would that make this worse in your mind? And he said, I think that, and he sighed, yeah, probably, yeah.
And the context at that point in the interview was whether there were sexual things that he did to her.
Yes, whether he did anything to Jessica other than murder and dismember her.
You say in your report that his account of what happened is missing pieces. Is that right?
Oh, yes. Yes, sir.
What are some of those pieces?
Well, first of all, he said that he had to kill her. He described his motivation as he had no choice, he had to kill her. Then he also said that he was not sexually attracted to her because she was too young. So but the question is, if he didn't kidnap her specifically to kill her or to rape her, he left no motivation for abducting her. What was the point in abducting her in the first place if you weren't sexually aroused by killing her and you weren't sexually aroused by raping her? So he denied any motivation for the attack. He also, we know that he left out any reference to sexual excitement in the killing or dismemberment, and yet we know from what he watched that he masturbated to snuff films and he masturbated to dismemberment. He talks about viewing pornography that shows...
Excuse me for interrupting. Again, I'm going to object for lack of foundation for the opinion, as well as speculation and conjecture.
You know, she's giving her foundation.
Overrule.
Okay. He talks himself in the interviews about the fact that he masturbated to killing and dismemberment, and that he got a high from it. Well, he killed and dismembered her, and we have, I don't believe, any logical motive for the dismemberment except the sexual thrill that came out of it.
You note that he said that he masturbated to dismemberment in a sexual manner, that is, dismemberment of somebody that was in a sexual manner. What did you make of that statement?
Those two things, sex and dismemberment, don't go together for the rest of us. There is no such thing for most of humanity as a sexualized dismemberment. So what that tells me is that he specifically linked the dismemberment that he was watching to a sexual thrill.
You also note that Investigator Boatwright, during his interview with Austin Sigg, noted that as Mr. Sigg was describing dismembering this little girl, that his pupils were dilated, and he thought enough of that, as you report in your report, that he wrote that in his report, that Austin Sigg's pupils were dilated. Is that significant?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Have you studied, have you observed pupillary response to sexual arousal?
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope of the information provided to the defense.
I'll sustain.
Let me ask it differently.
You may ask.
All right. Is someone's pupillary response to sexual stimulus something that you've learned to interpret?
Same objection, Your Honor, in terms of notice as well.
I'm not sure, given she may have, I'm not sure that's within what she was being offered as or presented as her area of expertise as to pupil dilation.
Are there physiological responses that, as a psychologist, as an evaluator of violent behavior, is that part of your field of expertise?
I'm going to continue to maintain this objection about physiological responses to the notice as well as due
I want to hear a response. Steady pupils and...
Well, I'm sorry, it was a clumsy question. Maybe I can ask it a little differently.
Go ahead.
As a psychologist, do you study physiological responses, nervousness, pupillary response, other body characteristics? Is that part of your work?
This is particularly part of my work on deception. I train on deception, and the detection of deception involves looking for physiological signs as opposed to simply relying on verbal report.
And do you look at the discrepancy between what someone says sometimes and their physiological response?
Yes, sir.
Now, regarding pupillary response particularly, is that something that you have studied in your 30-plus years of evaluating violent offenders and sexual offenders?
I see the conductor and going to
I must hear the answer.
object and challenge.
I wanna hear the answer.
Okay, that's the question again.
Yes. Have you studied how what pupillary response, or the size or the pupillary response that someone has when recounting an offense?
Yes.
Under what circumstances? Is there literature on the subject that you've studied? Have you studied that in observing offenders you've evaluated? What's the foundation for your knowledge?
Your Honor, I'm sorry. I started this this morning, telling the court that what we were going to end up hearing was a human lie detector, and that's really what this testimony is. It goes well beyond the scope of what was disclosed to the defense. It's an incredibly serious hearing over the next 2 days, and I am overwhelmed by this line of questioning. I'm frankly almost speechless about this line of questioning, and I am going to maintain that objection.
Whether speechless or not, it's in the report.
Thank you. It's in the report, and she's acknowledged that one of the, I believe the detective spoke right, that during a portion of it he noticed pupils dilate. I understand that. Next question. I don't need any more information as to whether the pupils dilated or didn't dilate. Next question.
Can I ask?
Next area, please.
I'm sorry, so you don't want me to ask what that means?
No.
Okay.
I'll figure that out myself.
Okay. I thought that was the answer. You talked about discrepancies or things, not discrepancies, things was the answer. Jessica Ridgway, but that he was looking for someone smaller than the Kettner jogger, someone he could control. That was after the failed attack on the Kettner jogger. Did you evaluate whether he had a specific interest in children?
Well, the pornography shows that he had a specific interest in children. His mother found pornography on his computer in, I believe, 2008 and sent him to treatment for it. He continued to watch pornography involving children. There's research by Sato that shows that people who watch child pornography on average have a higher sexual interest in children even than people who molest children, and that child pornography can be used to make a diagnosis of pedophilia. So there's no question he had an interest in sexual interest in children from his long-standing pornographic interests, but as well he stayed at the house until the elementary school children would be on their way to school, and was not accurate about that. His self-report was not accurate. And he said he only stayed 5 to 10 minutes and then just drove around. But we know from the neighbor's camera that he stayed a much longer period of time, and in fact only left the house at the period of time in which the elementary children would be walking to school.
And I want to break that down a little bit to make sure we understand. So he told the police that he dropped his brother off at Stanley Lake High School, returned home, was home for 5 to 10 minutes, and then left the home. And what you're saying is your review of the record shows that he was home for a longer period of time.
Yes.
Actually 46 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Before he left. And
Yes,
that was
he did.
significant to you. Why?
Because at the time he left the house, elementary school children would be going to school, and he was familiar with the school schedule.
Objection, lack of foundation, speculation.
And you base that based on the reports that you read?
But that's based on the reports and the neighbor's camera.
And school starts were staggered. The high school starting
Yes, sir.
first, then middle school, then elementary school.
Yes, sir.
So the only people walking to school at that time of day would be elementary school age
Yes, sir.
children. Talk a little bit about the role of sexual fantasy in behavior. You mentioned in your report that he admitted to cutting Jessica Ridgway's hair. Is that significant?
Yes, why would he cut her hair? Typically, and he refers to this himself, sadists have a...
Objection, Your Honor. I object to this question. I object to the answer as non-responsive. I object to what I anticipate is going to be speculation and guesswork on the part of Dr. Salter in terms of analyzing any alleged conduct on the part of Mr. Sigg.
We're talking about his admission that he cut her hair.
Yeah, the only logical explanation for cutting her hair is that it is part of what he described as his sexual fantasy. He said he did have a sexual fantasy and that he was acting out a sexual fantasy. Well, often a sexual fantasy includes very specific details, like how long someone's hair is or what they're wearing, or how old they are, or what size they are. I mean, they have very specific sexual fantasies. And sadists often go out and try to act out the fantasy that they have.
You also note that you viewed a photograph of Jessica at Stanley Lake High School taken in January of 2012. She was attending a cheerleading camp at
Yes,
Stanley
sir.
Lake High School.
Yes, sir.
She was wearing a white t-shirt and black pants, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And those are the cheerleading outfits, the colors of the Stanley Lake High School cheerleaders, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Was that significant to you in your evaluation of this case and his motivations?
I don't follow the fact that she was a cheerleader and cheerleading. Does that affect her opinion as to Mr. Sigg?
Yes, that's the question. And I'll ask another.
What's the nexus?
Yeah, I'll give a few more facts.
You better lay some foundation, or else
Yes.
it's not going to help me a bit.
All right, thank you, Judge. In Austin Sigg's interview, is it fair to say that he says that he had her dress in a white t-shirt and black shorts?
Yes, sir.
That he said that that's after she's been made to put her clothing, he makes her put her clothing in her backpack,
Yes, sir.
and then he has her change her clothes into this white shirt and black shorts, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And he says that those are things that he just happened to have in his closet that he hadn't worn since junior high school, that clearly no longer fit him, but did fit her. Is that right?
That's what he said.
Is that significant?
Well, there's no logical reason for asking her to change clothes.
Objection, Your Honor. She's going to try and connect this to some undated photograph without any physical evidence or any admission or any witness testimony whatsoever to link the two. I'm objecting, and I would offer proof of any case in the information.
Well, yes, the point is, he dressed her a specific way, he cut her hair a specific way. We know that the cheerleader outfits, there's even a picture of her in pretty much the same outfit. So yes, I believe those two are connected.
And you may have answered this, but is it common for, I think you said, a certain type of sex offender to dress their victim in certain clothing?
She did testify.
All right.
Next question.
Again, talking about the role of sexual fantasy, in one of your books, your book on sexual predators, you say that the fantasy always leads, I think precedes the behavior. What does
Yes.
that mean?
It means that sadists and sexual killers they usually begin by masturbating to a fantasy in their minds. They just don't go out of the blue one day and assault someone. They first they develop a fantasy, they masturbate to it, they seek out the porn. They typically escalate in terms of the amount of violence that it takes to give them the same high. And then they go out and try to make, as one offender said, the perfect rape. The rape or the molestation or the abduction or the killing has to match the fantasy. Typically it doesn't exactly match it, but it's fodder for the next fantasy. And then they often continue this process of acting out their fantasies and trying to make the reality match the fantasy.
Is it important to evaluate the reasons for a murder? When someone says that they killed somebody for a particular purpose, is that important in your work to analyze that
Well,
claim?
If you want to understand their psychological makeup, then yes, it is.
Is it fair to say that Austin Sigg said that he, in essence, murdered Jessica Ridgway because he had no other choice if he wanted to get away with his crimes?
Yes, he did say that.
Did you find reason or other motivations for his crime, for murdering Jessica?
Well, certainly look at the pornography that he was watching. He was watching snuff films.
And let me stop you there. What is a snuff film?
It's a film in which someone is typically raped and murdered, either simulated or real.
So he's watching snuff films, and I think you described...
He's watching sexual dismemberment films. I mean, the material that he was sexually aroused to involved murder and dismemberment.
I believe she's testified to all of this previously.
And if I understand it, one of the reasons he gave was for dismembering her was, let's talk about specifically dismemberment, that he said he dismembered her to make it easier to get rid of the body. Is that right?
He did say that.
Did you evaluate that part of the offense?
Yes.
And what conclusions did you draw?
I didn't find that statement credible.
Why not?
Well, first of all, he had carried her up the stairs while she was alive and intact, so he was clearly able to manage her body. Secondly, if you start taking multiple trips with body parts, you end up increasing your risk. The simplest thing is just to go dump the body somewhere, and you're out for one trip and you've dumped the body. If you're going to take body parts to different places, you're going to have the body in your possession longer, and you take a greater chance of getting caught.
You also note, and he said, that he kept certain body parts, particularly he kept her skull. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And he claimed that he said that he had a fascination in the skull. Is that right?
He did.
And he talked about taking it out and touching it. Is that right?
He did.
What, if anything, is significant in that behavior?
Well, first of all, it's very significant in terms of his callousness. This was not an impulse that he had, and then he felt horrible afterwards and tried to get away with it. He brought the body parts back up. He considered keeping the body parts. He considered what else he could do to the body parts. He said that at one point. So it tells you something about the nature of the offense and of his interest.
And let me, there's a question I didn't ask. Let me get back to the significance of his interest in dismemberment. Based on your evaluation of the case, when did he form a plan to kill Jessica?
Well, he said himself that the moment she was in the car, he knew she was dead.
Do you believe that, or is there evidence that he formed a plan to kill before he kidnapped her?
Oh, I'm sure he planned it before he kidnapped her, because when he was asked by police, what were you planning on doing to the jogger, he said the same thing that I did to Jessica. So he actually had planned to kill the jogger and had even talked about a place that he thought where he could dispose the body in the mountains. So when he went into this offense, he has admitted that he had the same plan.
And you're talking about the point in the interview when he's talking about the Kettner jogger, where he says that he would dispose of the body in the mountains in some sulfur pits that he learned about.
Yes, sir. He had already thought about body disposal, and he had not even gotten her in a car. He had planned the whole thing in advance.
And what about his specific interest in dismemberment? Does that suggest a reason to kill Jessica other than fear of being caught?
Well, certainly, if you are masturbating to sexual dismemberment, and you do have to kill someone to be able to dismember them.
You also indicate that Austin Sigg may have that necrophilia may play a part in this offense.
Certainly.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
What facts?
Characterization as well as the foundation, lack of foundation, speculation and conjecture, Your Honor.
What facts lead you to that conclusion?
He got rid of all of the organs of the body. I have seen a case before in which someone killed a woman in order to literally have sex with the viscera. There's no real alternative reason for getting rid of the body parts of the organs unless there was something incriminating, like DNA, in the organs. So that is a possibility.
And I think you said at page 8 of your report that Austin Sigg's treatment of Jessica Ridgway may indicate 2 types of necrophilia. What did you mean by that?
Well, there are 2 types of necrophilia, and one is when you kill someone when you find a dead body and you have sex with it. And I have interviewed people who've done that. And the second type of necrophilia is when you kill someone in order to have sex with the dead body. And he certainly didn't find a dead body. He certainly killed her.
Another thing you note in that same section is you note Austin Sigg's extreme callousness with regard to Jessica Ridgway. What did you mean by that?
Everything about this offense is callous. The child asked if she would ever see her mother again, and he lied to her by his own admission and said that she wouldn't. His treatment of her, his strangulation, dismemberment, fascination with the viscera, cutting her open, identifying each organ as he took it out, suggests extreme callousness. He was not hurriedly trying to get rid of it because it was so awful he couldn't deal with it. He was actually noting the body parts as they came out. When he talked about it later, he was eating a snack. He didn't seem to have any affective reaction whatsoever to a discussion of dismembering a child.
And you describe it as though, I think in your report, that he describes how he dismembered Jessica as though with the same kind of attitude someone would in completing a grocery list. Is that fair?
Yes, he did, and that is characteristic of this type of offender.
And what type of offender?
A sadistic offender, sadistic killer. I have actually an educational film on one of them, and it's the same phenomena. They show very little affect when they talk about what they did to the victims.
I want to talk about that a little bit. You talk about how normal people respond to pain. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you've done studies or trainings with others to see how they respond to even a verbal account of someone torturing a child. Is that right?
I have an educational video. I also make educational videos of interviews with offenders, and I have one with a sadist. And I was very careful in editing this that it wasn't too gruesome for people, and I only show it to professionals, and I warn them in advance. And every time, some people have to get up and leave the room because they can't tolerate it. There's also research that backs up by Dr. Bork, that backs up the belief that when people who are not attracted to gore or to child pornography have to view those things, that they do not get a high, that it negatively affects them. They get psychiatric symptoms. Sometimes they have to leave the field after a period of time. They get depressed. He has a whole list of symptoms that happen when people who are not attracted to sadism are forced to come in contact with sadistic material.
And in your evaluation of Austin Sigg, did you conclude that he finds pleasure in the pain of others?
Objection, Your Honor.
Did you make a conclusion whether he has sadistic characteristics?
Same objection.
I thought she already testified.
Okay. Does that concern you is that of concern in your evaluation of him?
I think
Objection, Your Honor. Relevant.
I thought she already testified that she displayed characteristics.
All right. I'll get to it in a later section. You also note that his interest in being a mortician, is that significant to you in analyzing his behavior and the risks that he presents?
in the light of his offense. I am not saying that all people who are morticians have some kind of fascination with corpses. But in the context of someone who then goes out and kills and dismembers someone, it is significant. It suggests a long-standing interest in corpses and dead bodies. There was nothing impulsive or sudden about this.
You also note his study that he did on body decomposition.
He did a study on body decomposition as well, and he took a forensic sciences course and said, learning how to, that he was learning how you could kill people and get away with it.
You also note in your report that he links his behavior to successful serial killers. Did you find that significant?
Yes, he said that he wanted to make the body disappear because that's what successful serial killers did. There's nothing in this presentation that suggests that his interests were in just attacking one person. He had...
Objection, Your Honor.
Have you studied serial killers?
Foundation.
Go ahead.
Speculation, foundation, beyond the scope of disclosure to the defense.
The objections, I think she's testifying to her review of the facts or of statements and so forth as to some opinion. If you're asking an opinion as to whether he was a serial killer, I'll sustain it.
I'm not asking whether he has killed other people, no.
I think she testified as to what was said. So.
And so does that present an increased risk, in your view, given his statement that he linked his behavior to successful serial killers?
Objection, Your Honor.
His risk, what?
To reoffend.
I'll sustain the objection. I'm not right now concerned about reoffending. Correct.
No, and I think you understand my position is,
I understand your position.
in terms of sentencing, that's something we should consider.
And I will.
All right.
I'm the person
All right.
that decision,
All right.
not her.
In your evaluation of Mr. Sigg, were you also aware that he was interviewed by the FBI on October 19th, the day that they collected his DNA, and gave a statement about what he was doing on October 5th, and that apparently the FBI agents saw no indication of deception? Is that a consideration in your evaluation, that he was able to, in essence, lie to the FBI with without having a trained FBI investigator be able to note any deception?
Objection to the characterization of the question. Objection based on notice to the defense. Objection based on conjecture. Objection based on speculation. Objection based on due process, Your Honor.
Sustain.
Judge, can we approach?
Please. Please. I don't know.
That's fine, Judge.
Do I need a record?
That's fine.
Please.
If I could, okay. Just want to see where I was in my notes.
Thank you. Sergeant, based on our off-the-record record we made, we're going to take our morning recess at this time. There's no objection, counsel.
No, Your Honor.
I'd ask everyone during the morning recess, please remain seated until we want to make sure that Mr. Sigg gets a chance for a break to the restroom and so forth. If you would remove Mr. Sigg. Thank you. We'll be in recess for approximately, let's take at least 20 minutes. We'll be in